Evening, everyone.
Meeting is being recorded.
There we go. Good evening, everyone. My name is Charles Johnson, and I'm a candidate for the CU Board of Regents at-large seat. I have a long and I would say fruitful relationship with the university. I came to Colorado over 35 years ago as a young freshman from Detroit, Michigan, traveled a long way to come out to further my education. I happened to participate as well on the CU football team. I was a student athlete at CU many years ago. But my relationship with CU, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, is far more in depth than just that. In 1988, I was voted as president of our university's Black Student Alliance. In 1990, I was voted student body tri-exec, all while participating as a student athlete on campus. In 1991, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as well, because when I talk to folks out on the campaign trail, the central focus seems to be my time as a student athlete when I was quarterback on our national championship team, but it's the least memorable, quite frankly, of for me, of my tenure at CU. I currently serve on the CU Leeds School, a business school board of advisors. I'm also currently serving as a member of the board of trustees for the university. As I mentioned before, my relationship with CU has been long and consistent over the years. I know the university, I know the system, and I've been engaged in it for many years. I also served as an associate athletic director from, I think, 2005 to 2011. So I've served and continue to serve in many different aspects of the CU system. People often ask me, CJ, what are the areas that you will focus on? Why are you doing this? And I talk about, I think, areas that if you go to my website, cj4cu.com, you'll see, I think tuition rates are way too high. The rising cost of tuition is rising at a faster rate than our families and students can keep up with. And so we're pricing our citizens of the great state of Colorado out of what is a magnificent educational experience for many of our kids. I think the state of our mental health, particularly as it relates to many of our young students, is in peril. This to me is a red flag issue that we're not talking nearly enough about. As a member of the Leeds School of Business, the Business Schools Board of Advisors, I get statistics on the state of our students' health in many cases, and the alarming number of suicides and suicide attempts and issues that should be, as I mentioned before, red flag issues for us, in my opinion, isn't rising to that level. This is something that we have to be far more engaged with and understanding, particularly with technology and how it's often, in many cases, used as an instrument that further isolates many of our kids and cause a great deal of loneliness and challenges from a mental health perspective. That's something we have to talk more about and be more clear on our mission to address. I often talk as well about climate. If we're not, as one of the nation's lead research institutions, this is something we have to be on our front feet with respect to. We should be leading the nation with respect to figuring out how to address the issue that we have with our climate. Quite frankly, if we're not talking about and looking for ways to address this issue, then not much else is all that relevant when you talk about the sustainability of our great state, quite frankly, of the earth at large. And finally, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I currently work for Ball Corporation. Ball is a Fortune 500 company. It's the world's leading sustainability company. We manufacture aluminum packages, 100% recyclable, 100% sustainable. And I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Ball. It's interesting, when I served in student government over 35 years ago, we were having many of the same conversations we're having today as it relates to access for underrepresented populations. This is a big issue that we seem to have all the talking points with respect to, but not necessarily doing the work that's needed to close the gap and to bring greater access to more people. In my work at Ball, I started in 2015. I was part of the original team that formed the D&I function at Ball Corporation. By 2019, Forbes magazine had voted Ball the #1 large company in America for diversity. I know what I'm doing when it comes to this issue. It's not just a talking point issue for me. And I look to, as I have in the past, work with the university and the CU system to make sure we're providing opportunities for not just the privileged, but for everyone. And I'm not just talking about with respect to race. I'm talking about with respect to class. I'm talking about with respect to gender. I have teammates who live across this great state. They got an education at the University of Colorado. They have kids now. They have families, whether we're talking on the Western Slope or we're talking on the Eastern Plains. And I ask them often, what is your relationship with CU and its system? And too often the answer is none. And I think that is a shame on a number of different fronts. With technology now, there's no reason why an institution like CU, with the over $17 billion economic impact in the state, a $6 billion budget, $3 billion in procurement power, isn't impacting every citizen in the state of Colorado. And so I'm committed to taking this incredible brand that's offered me so much in my life and making sure that others across this state without the means, just like me, I didn't have the economic resources in my family that would afford me an opportunity to attend the University of Colorado, particularly with the rising cost of tuition, but because I had what some considered an ability, and that was the ability to play football, quite frankly, the opportunity was afforded to me. You shouldn't be restricted or have to be able to run a touchdown or to score a three-point basket to have access to a world-class education. That should not be a prerequisite. And so I'm committed to making sure that what this system has to offer is available to citizens across the state, no matter what class or station you might come from. Now, having said all of that, what really animates me and motivates me and motivated me to enter this race is really seeing through my own lived experience. I came to CU in '87 as a walk-on. I earned a scholarship after my first semester. I'll share just a brief story that really defines who I am and how I came to be today. I was one of 7 children, parents divorced when I was 8 years old. I was the first in my family to go off to college. I was the 5th in the list of 7 kids. I came to Colorado, as I mentioned, as a walk-on. I'll never forget, it was October 1988. It was the night before we were going to play Oklahoma in a football game. And I was preparing to play the next day. What happened to me is something that I think in some way, shape, or form happens to a number of students who don't have economic resources on campus. You just have to find a way. I found myself in a situation where, as I was stretching, getting prepared for a football game, 2 gentlemen in suits came to our practice. They visited the practice, and they came to me and said, "CJ, we need to talk to you." And so they began to talk and inform me that because I had not paid that first semester tuition before I was on scholarship, that I had been disenrolled from school. And as a result, I could not participate on this football team. But they went further. They went on to say, not only can you not participate in a football game, but you're not even a student on campus. Legally, we have to ask you to go, and they gave me a brown paper or plastic bag and said, you have to go clean your locker out. Not only do you have to clean your locker out, but you also have to go and clean your dorm out, because by law, you cannot be on campus and occupy our space if you're not a student. This was October of 1988. From October of 88 through March of 1990, I went and worked at a roller skate manufacturing plant in East Boulder to earn the $6,248 necessary for me to re-enroll in school. Plan went for the first time in my life, I actually had a plan that worked out. And I re-enrolled in school, and that projected me into what was a list of priorities that shaped who I am today. It was the best thing that happened to me. Yes, we won a national championship. Yes, I was part and voted the most valuable player of the national championship game. But if you ask me the most impactful things that happened to me or for me, it was that period in which what I thought was safe and secure was taken away from me. I understood the challenges that many of our students, many of our families who don't have the means that others do have in just trying to figure out a way to piece together resources necessary to get an education. I'm sensitive to that. I understand it. And I want to be a bridge to make sure that there are resources and people who hear the voices of those who are oftentimes just not heard. And so that's why I'm in this race. It's very important to me that that CU, the system, CU Boulder, Colorado Springs, Anschutz, and Denver are brands and campuses that are accessible to everyone in the state of Colorado. If not as a student, member of the faculty or staff, then certainly you're feeling the impact of what CU brings to offer with all of, again, the economic resources that I mentioned to you just a few minutes ago. That is vitally important to me, and I want to make sure that CU lives up to what its responsibility is and being that impactful for every citizen in this great state. So with that, I hope we have time for questions. I tend to get a little, animated when I talk about this because it's something that's extremely near and dear to me. But I want to slow it down a bit, and hopefully there are some questions that I can answer. And again, this race is important from a number of different perspectives. And Elliot is quick to remind folks, as I am as well, that there's a unique dynamic in this year's CU Board of Regents race. We're second on the ballot below the presidential race because we're the only other statewide race in this election cycle. And so it packs an additional kind of punch. We're not as down ballot as we have traditionally been. And I also think the candidate for this race and for this Democratic Party has to do its part in motivating what I'm beginning to sense is a fairly dormant base of voters out there, particularly in our party. We have to work to make sure that our young students in particular, but Democratic voters are as excited about what's at stake in this election as we are, those of us who are on this telephone call and engage this work on a daily basis. So again, that's who I am, Charles Johnson, running for the CU Board of Regents, and I would love to take any questions that you all may have.
So if you guys have questions for Charles, I think we've got time for maybe one or two quick ones. Please raise your hand so I can recognize you in the question. Okay, Candace, you raised your hand.
Thanks. Hi, Charles. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. Can you just tell us back to some basics? There's one Board of Regents position open up for election, and you have a primary opponent. Is that?
Yep. Yes. In fact,
okay. And you have a primary opponent. So tell us, how are you doing any comparative, you versus your primary component?
Yeah, by the way, my primary component is that guy right there. His name is Kevin.
Sorry, I should have tried closer.
No, that's perfectly fine. And let me just say this from the onset. We've been on the campaign trail shoulder to shoulder for several months now. And we've made a pledge to be civil and demonstrate the brotherhood in this case, if you will, or the civility that we hope that all politicians adhere to. But it didn't take a pledge to do that. He's a decent guy. I really like the guy. So Elliot is my primary opponent. And I'm sorry, you had one other question.
It was just mostly about the race, and you mentioned
Yes.
that this is going to get some priority because you're going to be up on the ballot. But just in terms of looking ahead to working for candidates, the Democratic candidates here, what we should be paying attention to if you don't happen to make it back through during the general election. Can you look ahead to where we might be going if there's a Republican and what that looks like?
Yeah, and so there's a primary. The primary election is in June, and from there we'll go to the general election. I'm not certain if there is a committed Republican candidate for this seat yet. There are 9 members of the CU Board of Regents. Right now, we have a razor-thin majority, 5-4 Democrat. For the first time in, I think, 40 years. We have to keep that in mind. And this race will, the outcome of this race, assuming Democrats win, will keep Democrats in the majority on the CU Board of Regents. Nine total board members, and 8 of whom are elected out of each of the congressional districts, and 1 elected at large, and that's the race that both Elliot and I are vying for.
Okay, well, Charles, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Candace, thanks for the question. I'm going to stop recording now, and so we've got